Hey everyone, and welcome back once again to Terraria. This is the third and final part of my challenge series, where I'm trying to beat Terraria using only weapons I've never used before in the 2,000 plus hours I have in this game. In the last episode, we took down Plantera, moving us into the late game, and today is the day that we're gonna close out the series and kill the Moonlord. I'm gonna be extra strict this time around with what weapons I'm allowed to use. To be honest, I have taken some very minor liberties, especially in the last episode with my definition of never used before. Weapons like the Orichalcum Repeater, Cursed Flames, Magical Harp, Super Star Shooter, Phantom Phoenix, and the Tome of Infinite Wisdom, I was at least familiar with how the items worked and how powerful they were, despite me never having really used them against a boss. But today we're gonna be closing out the series strong, using only weapons that I truly have never used before. The Moonlord is going down. Let's get into the episode. So Plantera drops a few weapons that I was hoping we could get, the Nettle Burst, the Flower Pow, or the Grenade Launcher. To my delight, she ended up giving us the Nettle Burst, a very unusual weapon that I've always just thrown in my chest as soon as I get it. It shoots long thorny vines that linger for a bit and phase through walls, but its damage is probably why I've never used it before. So now that Plantera is gone, the dungeon and Solar Eclipse are now full of new enemies, dropping plenty of good accessories and weapons. The Frost Moon and Pumpkin Moon events are also now available to challenge, and the Empress of Light is also a boss that you can fight now before Golem. I think that the dungeon is where I'm gonna head first, with a few items in mind. Before that though, our new NPC, the Cyborg, sells a peculiar weapon called the Proximity Mine Launcher. What's weird about this weapon is that I've always seen it in his inventory. It has a crazy looking sprite and it does 80 base damage, but I think that whenever I buy it, I just get confused with what ammo type it's supposed to use and I just end up not using it. Well, it doesn't use mines, like the name suggests, but instead uses rockets. Waiting until night lets us buy rocket 3s from the Cyborg. So the Proximity Mine Launcher is actually a really interesting weapon. It launches, as you'd expect, proximity mines at a very slow rate of fire that are supremely affected by gravity. At first, it doesn't seem like a very good weapon, but the description of the item tells us that the mines that have become stationary will deal triple their original damage. The mines also hang around for an entire minute before exploding, so this is actually a really strategic weapon that does some pretty good damage. We'll get some good use out of it later, but for now let's enter the dungeon. Unlike the last time we were here, there are a couple items that I do want to pick up. There are 3 magical staves within the dungeon, all of which I've never really gotten to use to the best of their ability. Out of all of them, the Infernal fork is the one I'm least familiar with, so that's the weapon I'll be searching for. Shroomite bars can be combined with rocket 3s to create mini nukes, the highest damaging rocket type that doesn't destroy tiles. This will add to the Proximity Mine Launcher's damage, but there's also a few other rocket using weapons that we'll be picking up soon. Geez, I really forgot how good wings are. I'm not too worried about the next boss, Golem, but what I am scared about is Tier 3 of the Old One's army, which gets unlocked after defeating Golem. Tier 2 of the event was already much harder than I could have ever expected, and Tier 3's final boss is frankly terrifying. I'm not even sure if I'm going to be able to do it. I'm definitely going to be a lot more methodical in approaching the event this time around. This time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save up a fair bit of medals before shifting the event into its next tier, so that I'll have a little bit of a head start. If I wanted to, I could just save up enough medals to buy the armor as soon as we kill Golem, but not only would that be extremely arduous to grind for, since you need to get up to 150 defender medals to get one set of armor, but that also just feels a little bit too cheaty. I will, however, save up at least 60 defender medals before killing Golem in order to purchase one of the tier 3 sentries. So, since I'm not here for the boss, I'm obviously in search of solar tablets. The Eclipse only has one weapon that I can remember never using before, which is the nail gun. I don't know, it could be good, but I ended up getting absolutely destroyed by the Eclipse enemies. Especially when a Mothron would spawn, my limited arsenal was barely even tickling the mini-boss. Ugh, I don't even need your items, just leave me alone. The nail heads themselves are also not very friendly, and I definitely did not end up picking up this weapon before the end of the day. Also, the Infernal Rod, while its fiery explosions are really nice and it does do a pretty good amount of damage, the projectiles are just so painfully slow and the explosions are really only good for enemies that don't move around too much. I decided to take an easier approach in looking for a new weapon, and went back to Plantera to claim the few other items that I wanted to get out of her. Wow, thanks for not making that annoying, Plantera. I was excited at first for the flower pow, before I remembered, oh yeah, it's a flail. The grenade launcher, on the other hand, is genuinely nice. Another use for my mini nukes, and it basically just shoots rapid fire in comparison to the mine launcher with 60 damage. Definitely a golem killing weapon. I didn't want to have to bust out the Super Star Shooter again to grind Old One's Army tier 2, so I decided to pick up the first piercing weapon that I could think of, the Shadow Beam Staff. Now, while I'm not totally familiar with this weapon, I definitely have wielded it for short periods of time in the past, so I'm not going to use it for anything other than farming for defender medals before Golem. My only other options would have had me grinding for stars, and I really don't want to do that. But that isn't the only weapon we can get from coming back down here. The rocket launcher is the third rocket using weapon we can get that I've never used before. I honestly just thought it was an upgrade to the grenade launcher, but instead of its rockets being affected by gravity, it shoots them in a completely straight line. In order to increase the damage of the Shadow Beam Staff, I also purchased the Apprentice Armor from the Tavern Keep. The Squire Armor's defense is great, but for the Old One's Army grind, it would be nice to have more damage over defense. Oh my god, I actually died to Golem. Well, I really wanted to get the Stinger, a weird range weapon that I've never used before, but maybe this says I should try and get some items from the holiday events first. Oh, no. Oh, well. I really do not want to fight the Martians right now. My weapons are barely even strong enough to kill Golem, and I'm imagining that this is gonna go about as well as the pirate invasion did earlier in the playthrough. But we basically have to, because we can't summon the Pumpkin or Frost Moons until the event is cleared. It's in this event that I started to learn the power of the proximity mine launcher. Since the mines hang around for an entire minute and they only detonate themselves one at a time as enemies go near them, you can just place a bunch all over the ground and wait for the horde of aliens to trample all over them, dealing 500 damage in a wide explosion per mine. And now that I think about it, this would be an extremely useful weapon for the Old One's army. I didn't even try to take on a Martian saucer, not that we can even use any of its items anyways. However, even though we didn't get any of the weapons from the saucer, one of the enemies ended up dropping the charged blaster cannon. Since I'm usually more focused on the saucer's weapons than anything else when fighting the Martian invasion, I've not only rarely picked this thing up, but I've never even used it before. It's a really unique weapon. When holding down left click, it shoots 6 small orbs, then 3 larger orbs that deal more damage and pierce through everything, and it ends the combo by firing a constant beam, dealing hundreds of damage per second. It's basically just a discount version of the last Prism, a devastatingly powerful Moonlord drop. Interestingly, it does the exact same amount of damage, its only downsides being its charge up time, the smaller size of the beam, and the duration of the beam, which lasts maybe 5 seconds before a recharge is required. Like the last Prism, it also eats up an ungodly amount of mana. It's a very unexpected pickup from an event that I was only trying to clear to do other events, but my immediate thought was that this could be a really good weapon against the Old One's army. But let's go back to focusing on the holiday events, and also the other weapons that we haven't picked up yet. From the Pumpkin Moon, I want to try and get the Jack-O-Lantern launcher and the Candy Corn rifle, and from the Frost Moon, I think that the Christmas tree sword would be a fun one to try out since I know it got a rework. So, roll the montage, let's try and get some of these weapons. So at this stage of the game, there's still a few weapons that we could get. The Stinger from Golem, the Nail Gun from the Eclipse, the Christmas Tree Sword from an Everscream, and maybe even the Electro Spear Launcher from a Martian Saucer. But I mean, do we really need to get any of those? At this point, we're kind of running out of bosses to use them on. Empress and Fishron don't need to die, Lunatic Cultist can be done with just the fork of the rocket launcher anyway, and none of these weapons would really be any help against the Old One's army, since piercing is the only weapon stat that matters in that event, and we already have the blaster cannon. Even the Candy Corn rifle, the weapon we just picked up, I mean, are we really even gonna use it on anything? I kinda don't think so. So let's leave these weapons alone for now, and instead let's talk about the Moonlord. The Moonlord is a terribly difficult boss, with insanely high damage, a lot of health, attacks that are uncoordinated and unpredictable, and above all is one of the worst bosses in the game to summon and grind. Usually, a setup against the Moonlord would consist of weapons crafted from lunar fragments, and an armor set obtained from post-Plantera materials, but there's a bit of a problem when considering our weapon options. None of the lunar fragment weapons, the Solar Eruption, Daybreak, Vortex Beater, Phantasm, Nebula Arcanum, Nebula Blaze, and the Stardust Dragon, with the exception of the Stardust Cell Staff, a summon weapon, and the one that's generally considered to be worse than its brother, are weapons that I'm allowed to use. And then there's the problem of the armors. No Beetle, Spectre, Shroomite, Spooky, Tiki. Pretty much only the armors that are sold by the Tavern Keep are allowed, which require an absolutely ridiculous cost of Defender medals, with 150 for an entire set. So, the situation against the Moonlord seems pretty hopeless, but there is a saving grace. The final boss of the Old One's army, the penultimate fight of the event, and a boss that I've never genuinely fought without the use of post-Moonlord equipment. You know her, you may or may not love her, the Etherean dragon Betsy drops an entire arsenal of weapons that are our only lifeline against the Moonlord. But this is Master Mode, and killing Betsy is no easy feat anyways, and I'm only using weapons, armor, and accessories that I've never used before. I don't even know if this is gonna be possible. Tier 2 was already much harder than I could have ever imagined, and I was even cheating a bit using the Orichalcum Repeater and the Super Star Shooter. But if we can't kill Betsy, we'll be fighting the final boss of Terraria with post-golem weapons. We've got to give it a try. On the first attempt, I ended up dying on wave 2 of 7 to these new Etherean lightning bugs that flew quickly to the crystal. On the second attempt, I made sure to take out the bugs quickly and made it all the way to wave 5. Like for tier 2, I was employing the same strategy of placing my ballistas up on these platforms so that they could target the birds that attempt to fly over the blaster cannon's beams. Wave 5 is the first wave of tier 3 where an ogre spawns, and it was ultimately what ended up defeating me. I felt like I wasn't doing enough damage, so I traded my defensive squire armor for the apprentice armor like I did earlier, boosting the blaster cannon's magic damage. This whole playthrough, I've been basically banking on a defense build to carry me safely through the game, but the Old One's army is not a survivability test. It's about being able to defend by quickly cutting down the waves of enemies that advance on the crystal. But I also don't want to ditch defense altogether. These enemies still do a crazy amount of damage, and dying in this event is really bad. Plus, we haven't even gotten to Betsy yet, who I fully expect is going to test my defense. The next attempt didn't go much further, but the ogre did die, and I was thinking of some more ways to boost my DPS. First, I traded out the Monk's Belt accessory for the Sunstone, which gives a bunch of good stat bonuses during the daytime. Next, I whipped up some magic power and wrath potions, contributing to a 30% increase in my magic damage output. With the armor, Sunstone, potions, and the clairvoyance buff from a crystal ball, I was now upping my magic damage by 72% compared to what I was working with before. With this power, I could absolutely shred through the wave 5 ogre, and even the twin ogres in wave 6. Being swift in my demolition also gave me more time to run around placing sentries down, as well as getting use out of the proximity mine launcher. And then, before I knew it, it was wave 7, and there she is. Probably the most terrifying thing about the Betsy boss fight is that not only do I have to fight her, but at the same time I have to make sure that the crystal doesn't break. And yes, enemies continue to pour out of the portals throughout your entire fight against the dragon. And on top of that, Betsy is no chump. She wallops hard, and with my weaker armor, I am perfectly liable to be killed by her. On this attempt, the first time seeing Betsy, I only got her a quarter of the way down before I ended up dying in a desperate attempt to save the crystal. But I was not discouraged, and I could do even more to increase my DPS. Making it to wave 7 brought me up to 80 defender medals, and I decided to spend them on the lightning aura staff, finally trying a different type of Tavern Keep sentry. This one creates a bubble that damages enemies on the inside. It doesn't do much damage, but while the ballistas have all the chance to miss their shots, enemies are guaranteed to walk through this damaging field. I reforged a few of my accessories to menacing, giving another 8% damage boost. Using the free sentry slots granted by my armor and the war table buff, I placed a spider queen on each side of the crystal, which will inflict the venom debuff onto every enemy. I made it to Betsy for the second time, and I tried as hard as I could to do as much damage to her as quickly as I could. This time, I got her down to half health before the crystal shattered and it was all over. More defender medals let me purchase the first part of the Dark Artist set. The leggings increased my summon damage by 10% over the Apprentice leggings, and a little 5% magical critical strike chance to go along with it. And one more attempt later, and Betsy was down to just under a quarter of her health left. I could hardly believe it. I could actually do this. I bought the Dark Artist hat, giving another Spider Queen, 15% more summon damage, and 5% more magic damage. And perhaps the smartest decision I made in regards to my strategy was to place a lightning aura right here, which will harm the pesky birds that are the biggest threat to the crystal. Okay, that feels good. To me, this was the final boss of the playthrough, and the fact that I was actually able to do it with my own strategy and with my own weapons when I thought that it might not be possible feels monumentally satisfying. Let's go, dude, and that fight is so stressful too. When I saw the Aerial Bane, I was momentarily a bit disgruntled because I thought it would just be another standard bow, like the Repeaters or the Phantom Phoenix. However, none of Betsy's weapons are like any other weapons. The Aerial Bane shoots 6 unique projectiles that, when arcing into an enemy, split and cause a hellstorm of 5 more projectiles below. We'll get the best damage out of it by using Venom Arrows, the highest damaging arrow in the game, and I think that this might be our weapon that carries us to the end of the game. The Lunatic Cultist went down easily with this new weapon. We took on the Stardust Pillar first. Then the Solar Pillar. Then Nebula. I did the Old One's army one final time, taking down Betsy while the crystal was nearly full health. This time she gave us one of her 2 melee weapons, and her wings as well. The wings are really great, and they even have a hover ability like some of the other wings. By now we had a lot of defender medals to be thrifty with, so I bought the entire red riding set, the ranged tier 3 armor, and also the Valhalla Knight Helm and the Greaves for the gigantic boost in defense. Our armor now gives us 68 defense, almost beating out the tanky beetle armor. Our accessories are also going to go back to full warding, bringing us up to 99 defense. With Iron Skin potions, the exquisitely stuffed buff, and the Bass statue, our defense against the Moonlord is going to be a fat 116. The Moonlord arena is going to be pretty simple, a long stretch of asphalt primed with honey spots, heart lanterns, and campfires. I also put teleporters on each end of the asphalt so that I won't need to turn around. The goal is going to be to kill the Moonlord within 3 tries, because anything more than that would require killing the lunatic cultist and all 4 pillars again. One of my biggest fears when entering this stage of the game is getting stuck in a loop of having to do the pillars over and over, so let's not get ourselves into that. And now, at this stage of the game, there's nothing left to do except to challenge the Moonlord. So let's take down the last pillar and let's do this. We have 3 attempts. And there you have it. Terraria, a game I have over 2,000 hours in, using only weapons that I've never used before. Now, are there still weapons in this game that I've never used before? Yes, there are. Even in just this episode, there were several weapons that I was just unable to use, but you know what? That just means that if I wanted to, I could do this challenge again sometime in the future. It would be a lot harder, yes, but I think that there's still the chance that it might be possible. So if you guys would like me to maybe bring this challenge back sometime in the future, maybe when a new Terraria update comes out, or maybe I could try it with the Calamity mod, be sure to let me know. But that concludes this series. It's so interesting to me just how many different and unique types of weapons there are in this game. So many that just get completely overshadowed by stronger and more popular weapons. So it was really fun to be able to try out some of those obscure weapons that I've never been able to try before. I think my favorite weapon had to be either the Toxicarp or the Blaster Cannon. Such interesting weapons that I just can't believe that I've never tried before. But anyways, thanks for watching this series, everyone. Again, let me know if you'd like to see more Terraria content from me. I'd love to do more, and I'm glad that you guys have enjoyed it. But that's it from me. I'll see you later, and thanks for watching.